Well, hello everyone. Adelaide in our community group asks a very good question. She asks, in your view, what is the work that poetry has to do in the 21st century? And this is such an important question. It's one that I'm often thinking about and often revising my thoughts on. So up to this point, at the beginning of 2025, let me give you my answer to this question. And I want to talk about what poetry is, what poetry should do, and how poets in the 21st century, I think, should be preparing themselves for this work, which is an enormously important work. I think that poetry should do what poetry has always done, and that is to scatter seeds over the wastelands, the spiritual deserts of contemporary life. There have always been deserts in our world. Every age has them. It seems that in recent times, the wastelands have grown faster than they have before, and the shadows have consumed more ground, I think, than they have in many, many years. It's very strange what's happening today. Virtue has become vice. Empathy has become a sin. Love is an inconvenience and a noble thing to refuse. And I think it's only going to get worse for a while. And that this is the world in which contemporary poets are having to write. So the first thing in answering this question is to go back to what the medieval scholastics called quiddity, the whatness of a thing. What is poetry? We have to first answer that before we can talk about what it will do and what it should do. Poetry is the starting point of all religious and spiritual expressions. It's the first language of spiritual life that all human beings share, and it's the earliest written literature of many cultures. And out of the poetic imagination come art, song, prophecy, and mythology. Poetry is the language of the soul. So the function of poetry is to put us in touch with what is common to us all, to make us aware of the living network in which our lives are enmeshed, a network of birds and trees and other animals and other human beings, of planets and the divine. There is something of a cosmic participation in poetry. So my own background is mostly in the Western tradition and in Western Christianity, and so there's something comparable here that I like to bring in, and that is the idea that God is a poet. In the Greek Orthodox liturgies, God is actually referred to as a poet. And going back to the root of the word in Greek, poiesis, meaning maker. But I think this is significant to think about. So in the Greek liturgies, you're constantly reminded of this, and that is the nature of the divine, a poet. So at least in some Christian traditions, you can get the sense that the poet is participating in the creative and divine energies that are sustaining and continuing to create nature. And this comes down to us from Neoplatonists, some of the Middle Platonists, early Christian thinkers, some mystics, and nearer to our own day, fantasy writers. I think a more recent articulation of all this was J.R.R. Tolkien's idea of mythopoiesis. Each age has its own articulation of it, and I'm sure that there are similar concepts in Eastern traditions as well. Poetry is the language of inner life. Something I emphasize quite a bit on this channel is the difference between poetry and the mode of everyday writing. Poets don't write just to document. They're not trying to just record and make a ledger of reality. Poets speak to translate language into experience, and oftentimes to translate experience into a language experience. That's what poetry does, and so I think the best thing poetry can do is what it's always done, is to make us aware of those experiences of the inner life. Whether that be the love of another person, or some kind of awareness of something that is within you, maybe mystical experiences that the world around you just simply does not speak of. Each of us has this vital drive that while the world cries buy, consume, stimulate, the murmur of the soul goes on, and what poetry does is to amplify the murmur of the soul. It's pervasive, and it puts our own soul into harmony with the world around us. That's what poetry does. Now, what should poets do in our own context in order to make sure that poetry does this? One of the things I think is most important is the idea of attention. And this brings us right to our present moment, because poetry offers readers in the 21st century an opportunity to sharpen their attention. Attention is a sacred faculty. There is a sacred space between you and what you're reading. We often think of poems or literature as existing in books or on the page, but it's actually not there. It's between the page and you. It's in the mind. The reading of the poem is the poem, and that can only be done through the surrender of attention, to undergo and experience and encounter with something that will most definitely alter your consciousness in some way. Every experience does this. We know this. You are different today by virtue of the experiences that you underwent between now and yesterday or 10 years ago. It's just a matter of fact that the real poem exists within this secret, sacred, solitary room within the reader. And it's there where we surrender to an encounter. In the book of Exodus, there's this story of Moses when he sees the burning bush, and he's called in and he's asked to remove his shoes. It doesn't exactly tell us why. And if you go to some Eastern temples, you also are asked to remove your shoes. And I think it means that the sacred encounter must happen on unmediated grounds of experience. There should not be something between you and the experience. That's the definition of an encounter. You must have this unmediated contact. Hopkins, I think, described our condition very well. The Victorian poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, when he said, "Nor can foot feel being shod." I tell my students at the start of each semester that you have the choice to whom or to what you will give your attention. Do not let it be stolen. Do not let it be wrested from you. The world will try to wrest your attention or to hassle you out of it. And that's why attention is so important. Attention is worth a lot of money. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed how many things are constantly competing for your attention, dividing it and selling it shreds? But it's worth more than money, your attention. It's priceless, and you must know how to regulate it. And this is true for readers and for poets, I think. Emily Dickinson was a master regulator of her attention. She has a beautiful poem, "The Soul Selects Her Own Society," in which she says, "The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door to her divine majority, present no more." And then she has this beautiful turn of phrase in which she says, "I have seen her, ample of ages, choose one, then close the valves of her attention like stone." And I love that metaphor, the valves of attention. I had a professor once who said that Emily Dickinson dealt in metaphors the way we deal in dimes and quarters. It was the currency of her language. This is true about the sovereignty of the reader and the writer. You have the choice as to what you will channel your attention. And reading is a process of selection. Writing is a process of selection. To what will you open the valves of your attention? To what must you close the valves of your attention? And it's the choice you make every day, and it's a choice you make when reading. Poets must be master regulators of their attention in this age. There is so much right now trying to overwhelm your attention on the news and forms of entertainment, and it's trying to steal your attention, and you must know how to keep hold of it. What many poets are writing today will outlast what's going on at the most powerful buildings in the nations. And this is true for a lot of poetry that we have today. So poetry can strengthen a reader's attention to language, to the world. And it can heighten our attention to the world of things, the real world of things. One way you can check to see whether you are in touch with this real world is to ask, how often do you notice the flowers on your walks? How many trees can you name? Can you identify the songs of birds? Or if you can't identify them, could you at least listen to them? Do you pay attention to them? Do you know more Taylor Swift lyrics than you do the names of animals that inhabit the world around you? And don't get me wrong, Taylor Swift is great, but the storehouse of poetry, of creative energy, is all around us in nature. And poetry has the ability to put us in touch with that reality. And a poet must reside in that reality. like a bird in the air or a fish in the creek. The poet, the contemporary poet, must be immersed in this real world in order to perform what poetry has always done, which is to put us in touch with the living network of things. And it's never had a harder time than now. The other thing that I think poetry should do in the 21st century is to furnish a language of symbols. We are a people without mythology or history. Histories and mythologies are being sold and commodified all the time, but these commercialized myths are not our own. Poetry is the origin of all mythology. It can furnish us with the common language and the common sense of mystery of life. So poetry in the 21st century should rescue the sacred faculty of attention from the wastelands of contemporary entertainment. It should put us in touch with ourselves, with others, and most of all with the inner life, the life of the spirit, which all of nature shares. It's a lot of work. It is a lot to ask for, and it's something that poetry has always done. Another thing that poets should do in the 21st century is they should love sound. I don't know, Adelaide, if you're a contemporary poet, perhaps that's why you're asking, but I think that there are certain things that a poet should do so that their poetry performs the sacred work. A trap that many poets fall into today, or many would-be poets, is that they think poetry is about sharing an idea that will change the world. Poetry has changed the world. There's no doubt about that. But they often forget that poetry is just as much about pleasing the ear as it is about conveying ideas. A poet today will have to listen well to language. They'll have to love letters and combinations of letters and the sounds that these letters make. They must be in love with words, not just what they mean, but they must also love the way they sound. They have to listen to the earth and to the creatures. I remember a couple summers ago, I went outside on the back porch of my apartment here in Cambridge. We have a small little plot of grass, and I went out in the grass, and at the edge of the garage, there was a tuft of weeds, and on one of the weeds was a small inchworm, and I thought, I'm going to sit here and watch this inchworm. And I sat there for several minutes watching this inchworm, completely unaware of my observation. When I looked up, and on the power line, just above me, across the yard, was this fat squirrel. You know how they'll rest their fists on their paunches as they sit there and contemplate something. But this squirrel was looking right down at me. And it was a funny moment where nature was contemplating nature. And I think that that's what poetry does. It contemplates reality from all angles. And that's what poetry is going to do in the 21st century. It also inculcates an awareness that we are in a network of awareness, of observation, and it's a sacred fabric. The last thing I'll say, and this is perhaps the hardest thing to do, and that is to remain sensitive. Poets are sensitive souls in a very hard and angry and mean world. You must resist the influences that are coercing you to become buffered. Have boundaries. Know your limits. Yes, do all of that, but at the same time, don't allow yourself to become jaded. And that's so difficult. One way to overcome this is to live for something else for a part of your day. You might have a small plant that you take care of. You might have a tree that you offer water to. Or you might have a bird bath that you fill every morning. Fill the bird bath. Watch the bird bath. See its visitors. Watch the reflection of passing clouds in the bird bath. View the starlight in the bird bath. I love starlight in bird baths because it's much more beautiful than looking directly at the sky, I think. But it often gets me in the mindset of poetry, of the mind of poetry. So you need to have something you give yourself to in a little way, a little something that gets you outside yourself and in service to someone else, because that's what poetry is. As leaves come to a tree, so poetry comes to a poet. And the leaves don't exist for the tree, but for those around the tree. Listen to the world around you. Listen to yourself. Record your dreams and seek to understand them. Everyone has a symbology that's personal, so that when I have a dream about turtles in clear water, I know exactly what my dream is trying to tell me. Or if I have a dream about dark water and fish, I know exactly what it means. And partly because of my own personal history, but you have that too. Everyone has their own symbology, which is at once universal and particular to them. You need to understand your own. You need to understand the system of symbols by which your unconscious communicates to you, by which the world communicates to you. Read those symbols, become aware of them, and read the book your days are writing. This is what I think poets are going to have to do in order to address what's going to happen in the 21st century, whatever that is. And it's something that they're going to have to address in the present moment now. So, Adelaide, thanks for this question. It was an excellent question that I'm going to keep thinking about myself. I hope this has helped. For everyone on YouTube who have joined us, thanks for watching, and until next time.